So we're going to be talking about cell transport and passive transport. First, we're going to recall the cell membrane. Our ICANN statement. So recalling the cell membrane. So just as a reminder, let's go back. So remember I told you the cell membrane can also be called the plasma membrane. Remember that it was made up of a phospholipid bilayer. Remember, bi means two. This is the two layers here. Okay, phospho is the phosphate heads. Okay, and then the lipid pieces with the oils are here. So remember that the heads, they like water. Okay, so that's the hydrophilic. The tails, okay, right here, do not like water. Okay, so that's the hydrophobic ends. The whole purpose of the cell membrane, it regulates what goes in and out of the cell. Cell membrane, this is just like basically a lab. So you can put starch solution and iodine solution. And what you could predict one of the ones that the starch will move across the membrane, um, or the iodine will move across the membrane. So if you can actually set this up at home and actually see what happens. Passive transport, high to low, high to low. Okay, this is what we're talking about. Water, lipids, and lipid soluble substances can go through the cell membrane. So as you see here, we have the cell membrane, and the things that are going through the cell are called diffusion. But the whole goal of this is to make it homeostasis. So this right here means balance. Okay, so the cell uses no energy. The energy would be called ATP, but we don't need any energy. So if someone was to be passive, it doesn't take a lot of energy to say, hey, you be like, hey, what's up? It takes energy for someone to be extra, to scream your name all the way down the hallway, to find where you at. So how we do this to get homeostasis? Well, our first one is going to be diffusion, and there are three. So this is our first one. Again, no energy is required. The goal is to go from high to low. All right. So high to low. Now, the best way at the very end, I'm going to explain it to you of how to understand passive. Again, high to low. All right. So diffusion, high to low. And again, this is just particles and no energy is required. Now we're going to talk about osmosis. Osmosis is only water. Yes, just water. Okay, so this type of diffusion where water moves across the membrane. So this is going to be an unequal distribution of molecules. So again, just osmosis is the movement of water. We're still talking about passive, so it still goes from high to low concentration. Here's just an idea what a concentration is. So concentration is the amount of solute, and solute in our terms today is going to be salt or sugar. Okay? And basically, look at all this Kool-Aid. Which one has the most sugar? Right? That's some dark Kool-Aid. That's that diabetic Kool-Aid. This one right here look like that's just water. That's the people who wants to say they're drinking Kool-Aid, but they on a diet. Will be There's three types of concentrations of osmosis solutions. So osmosis solutions, we have hypo, iso, and hyper. Hypo means less than, which is also means low. Iso will also mean same. Hyper means more than, or we can say high. Hypotonic solution. So again, solute is either like salt or sugar. Remember, hypo is going to deal with being low or less. So this is when the salt or sugar, or the real name solute concentration in the environment is lower than the cell. That means more water on the outside. And so what happens is the water goes inside the cell and the cell will expand. So we have a itty bitty cell. And I think of hypo, blow, blow up. Okay, so here's the little cell. Well, what happens is we don't have a lot of salt or sugar out here. So the water goes inside the cell because salt will suck it up, right? So this is water. Well, once water goes inside the cell, it blows up. Now, just like a water balloon, if you put too much water in it, what happens? It blows up. So a plant has what is called turgor pressure, and the cell then swells because the plant cell, it won't blow up, but it will swell a lot. Animals, we call it cytolysis. Cyto means cell. Remember, lysis means to break. Well, what happens is our cells break when we have too much water inside of it. Have you ever heard someone tell you you can drown by drinking too much water? Well, that comes because of the water in the cells getting too much water, and they do explode. This is what happens for the lungs when you supposedly drowning and stuff. So again, the outside has more water and less solute, so the water enters the cell, and as you see, it blows up. Okay, solute concentration is higher in the cell, so we have to get to a place, as you see here, everything's going in. Look at the arrows going in, going in. So iso means the same. Solute concentration in the environment, which is the same. So this is when it moves evenly in and out the cell. Okay, stays at a constant volume. So this is what you want. You want everything to be here. You don't want your cells blowing up, right? So we want to keep everything at an isotonic solution. Hypertonic, okay? Hyper means high. So now the solute, remember the salt or sugar, concentration in the environment is greater. Here goes the word high. That's what the high will come into than what is in the cell. So the cell loses its water and the cell shrinks. Now here's my picture. So if you have let's say we put a snail in here, right? And we get salt and we shake it on the snail. What's going to happen to the snail? He shrinks, okay, and dies. Why? If what happens if you look at the snail, you see a lot of water, right? And you see like a lot of water. Well, what happens is you put salt on him and he shrunk up. When you cook meat and you put salt on the meat, and as soon as you cook it up, what happens? The meat shrinks, right? So what happens is if you get in a, you ever lose water, or you in the water too much, you look wrinkly, or you suck something out of it and it gets wrinkly. Well, because it lost water, right? So in plants, that's called plasmolysis when the water leaves. Okay, turgor pressure is when it goes in, plasmolysis is when it leaves, and us, our cell just shrinks. Okay, cell just shrinks. You don't want your cell to shrink, and you don't want your cells to blow up. So we want to stay at isotonic as much as possible. So here's a picture. When your plants are living good, looks good, right? Now look at it. As soon as we take the water away. So the outside again has less water and more solute. So now look at this little shriveled up stuff. So water leaves the cell because again, salt sucks. So salt is going to either is going to drain the water or attract the water to where it's at. Here's some examples again of just what they look like um, from different pictures. So you're looking at a sore throat. Look at the different things that swell up. The tongue has some differences. Um, the coloring, and that is again where certain cells decide to come bigger. Some cells explode, some cells begin to shrink, causing others to appear. So, just as a quick summary, hypertonic, hyper, shrink. Okay, this is when water leaves. Iso, same. Hypo, blow. Okay, see the cells blowing up? This is when water goes in. So our last thing of diffusion is facilitated diffusion. So you ever had someone who say I'm a facilitator or I'm here to help? Well, they just need help. Remember when we talked about proteins, right? So we got to move proteins across this membrane, but protein is meat. Can you just swallow meat? No, you need to chew it up and get some help to get it down, right? So basically, this is what this is. You chewing up the proteins getting across. So if you look at the pictures, it's like a little mouth. It helps move larger particles like proteins. Again, everything is still high to low because we're talking about passive. No energy is needed. So as a quick, pretty much synopsis, um, this is going back over your osmosis, and these are three types. So again, hypo, if you look, what's going to happen to the cell? It's going to blow up. If you look at this one, look at the dots. They look evenly, right? It's going to stay the same. Well, look at this one. It doesn't have a lot of dots on here, and that's a lot of salt. That's going to shrink. Before I go into these questions, just as a quick thing, I want to talk about passive. So remember we said high to low, no energy. Well, guess what? If we're on a mountain and you are riding a bicycle, right? Does it take energy for you to go down a hill? No, you don't even have to push it. So when you think of passive, think of you riding a bicycle down the hill. You do not need to push the pedals. You don't need any energy. It's going to happen. Now here, we have to learn how to do these questions. We have to figure out which one is isotonic and which one is hypertonic, which one is hypotonic. Now by looking here, we realize that we have this circle. The circle is a cell. This is a beaker. Okay. We have water goes where it's needed. Okay. So if we're missing water, it's going to go to that place. So we have 90% water inside the cell and 90% water inside the cup. This is the same number, right? So 90% water, 90% water again. Which one do we want? That one's isotonic, right? It's the same. It has nowhere to go. It's even. So this one, we have 90% inside the cell. We have 85% inside the cup or the beaker. And you're saying, hey, Miss Cheek, well, it's not that far of a difference. Well, just remember, water goes where it's needed because, of course, the salt solution is higher. So remember, salt sucks. So salt is going to suck the water outside. So when water leaves the cell, that is called hyper, because what's going to happen to this? It's going to eventually shrink, okay? So now we have this one. We have 45% is water. 75% is water inside of the beaker. Now again, water goes where it's needed. So which one's the lower number? The cell. And then you realize salt sucks and the salt intake is higher. So water goes in the cell. But once the water goes inside the cell, we realize that it gets real big. And we call that hypo because the cell is going to eventually, yep, that's right, blow up. So just as if for you to see what it looks like with me giving you the answer for different ones. Please make sure you pause the screen and watch it and look at this because you will be tested on this. And just a quick review. What happens during, diffusion? Well, everything goes from high to low. High to low. So remember the mountain, right? You're on top of the mountain with the bike. It don't take energy for you to go down there. All right, so what happens? How does water move through osmosis? Well, it moves through a selective permeable membrane. And osmosis is only the movement of water. And which one does not need energy? So we know it's called passive, but you have to know the three types of passive. We have diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated. So diffusion is just particles. Right here is water. And then facilitated, remember that was proteins or the heavier substance like proteins. All right, that's the end of our lesson.